My name is Richard Hall. I'm 61 years old, and until a few months ago, I honestly thought my working life was reaching its quiet, unnoticed end. But what happened inside that office, what I lived through, what I heard, what I endured, and what I eventually witnessed proved that age isn't a weakness. Experience isn't outdated, and respect isn't something you ask for. It's something life forces people to give you when the truth finally comes out. So let me tell you how my own boss tried to humiliate me, how he mocked me for being too old, and how one unexpected announcement from the CEO flipped everything so hard that the entire company froze in shock. I started working at North River Tech when computers were still the size of washing machines, when punch cards were a thing, and when the company barely had 20 employees. And back then I was the young guy, the kid who fixed everything, stayed late, and learned faster than anyone else. And through the years I became the guy everyone trusted, the one people came to when things broke, when systems crashed, when deadlines were impossible, when clients got angry. But things changed when the company hired a new department head, a man named Evan Brooks, 33 years old, loud, overconfident, obsessed with titles, and convinced that anyone over 50 belonged in a museum. He walked in on his first day clapping loudly, telling us to modernize our brains, and after quickly scanning our faces, his eyes locked on me, and he smirked as if he had discovered a joke. And from that moment on, I became his favorite target. The old guy, the boomer, the legacy artifact, the walking reminder of everything he thought was outdated. At first, I ignored it. Age jokes, mild digs, sarcastic comments about my ancient keyboard, my reading glasses, or how I typed like a grandpa. But then it escalated, and he began calling me out in meetings, interrupting every suggestion I made with, "Thanks, Richard. But let's hear from someone who understands the 21st century." And some of the younger employees laughed nervously because they needed their jobs. And I sat there swallowing my frustration, reminding myself that dignity sometimes means staying quiet, but it didn't stop. One afternoon, he asked the entire team to stay for a mandatory meeting, and I walked in to see a slide on the projector titled "People Who Slow Us Down," and there, right in the center, was my picture. Yes, my picture zoomed in awkwardly, unflattering, clearly chosen to embarrass me. And the room went silent as soon as people realized what he had done, but Evan laughed, clapped his hands, and said, "Come on, guys, it's a joke, lighten up. It's just our old buddy Richard." And he looked at me with that smug smile, the one that said he was sure he would get away with it because people like me rarely fight back. I went home that night feeling like someone had cut a piece out of my spirit. And I sat at my kitchen table replaying every insult he'd thrown at me. And for the first time in my career, I wondered if maybe I really didn't belong anymore. Maybe I had become slow. Maybe I was outdated. Maybe the world had moved on without me. But then something inside me snapped. Something deep. Something that only years of quiet strength can build. And I told myself, "No, Richard. You've built systems, saved projects, trained half this company, and held this place together for decades. Don't you dare let a kid with hair gel and an ego push you out." So the next day I returned to work, ready to keep my dignity intact even if no one else saw it. And that morning something strange happened. The atmosphere felt tense. People whispered, and managers moved around quickly as if something huge was happening. And around 10 a.m. the announcement came, "CEO arriving today, mandatory all hands meeting at noon." Now, here's the thing, our CEO, Jonathan Reeves, hardly ever visited the office unless something major was happening. And I hadn't seen him in almost a year, but he knew me, he respected me. He had once said I was the backbone of the technical division, but I had no idea he was coming. And by the frantic looks on some managers' faces, they didn't either. At noon, everyone shuffled into the main hall. Hundreds of employees, managers, directors, all in rows. And Evan stood in front near the stage, acting like the star of the show, smoothing his suit, adjusting his tie, practicing his fake smile because he assumed he'd be presenting something impressive, but fate had other plans. The CEO entered quietly. No big announcement, no applause, just a calm, serious man walking toward the podium with a folder in his hand. And instead of greeting the room, he turned to one of the assistants and said, "Loudly enough for all of us to hear. Bring up the clips." The entire hall looked confused except the few people who already knew what was coming. And suddenly on the giant screen behind the CEO, a video began to play. Security camera footage from our meeting room, the exact footage from the humiliating presentation where Evan mocked me, where my face was shown on a slide titled "People Who Slow Us Down," where he laughed and ridiculed me as the team sat frozen. And the room became so silent that people stopped breathing. Evan's face turned ash white and he stuttered, "Sir, that was taken out of context, just a harmless joke, But the CEO held up his hand sharply, silencing him. Then he turned to the audience and said, in a firm voice, "This company was built not by flashy presentations, but by people who worked, who stayed, who gave their lives to keep this place standing." And then he looked straight at me, and continued, "And no one represents that better than Richard Hall, who has been with this company longer than most of you have been alive, who built core systems still running today, who solved crises while others panicked, who has trained generations of employees, and who has earned more respect than any title could ever give." And suddenly the entire hall erupted in applause, not polite claps, but real applause, long, loud, rising like a wave, and I felt something warm in my chest. Something I hadn't felt in years, something like being seen. Then the CEO turned to Evan, whose hands were shaking, and said, "You mocked a man this company depends on. You humiliated someone who deserved honor, and you did it publicly. Now you'll face the same." And with that he announced, "Effective immediately. Mr. Brooks is removed from his position as department head," and the room gasped as Evan stood there frozen, unable to process what was happening. But the CEO wasn't done. He turned back to me and said, "Richard, starting today you will serve as Senior Systems Advisor," reporting directly to me. And my knees almost gave out right there, because after decades of loyalty, decades of staying quiet, decades of being the reliable old guy in the background, suddenly I wasn't background anymore, I was center stage. After the meeting, dozens of employees came up to me, people who had laughed nervously during Evan's jokes, people who had stayed silent, people who had been afraid to speak up, and they apologized. They thanked me, they told me I deserved better, and I realized something important. Sometimes people aren't bad, they're just scared. And sometimes they need a leader to show them what the right thing looks like. That evening, as I packed my things to move into my new office, I saw Evan leaving the building with a cardboard box, his eyes red, his swagger gone, his arrogance dissolved, and for a moment I felt almost sorry for him. Because arrogance is a prison, and only humility sets people free. When I got home that night, I stood in front of my bathroom mirror, looked at my gray hair, my wrinkles, my tired eyes, and for the first time in years, I didn't see old, I saw earned, I saw survived, I saw respected, and I whispered to myself, "You still belong, Richard. You always did, because growing older isn't losing value, it's gaining power, and the world eventually realizes it, even if it takes one unforgettable announcement from the CEO to make everyone finally see the truth."